No code came up, Glide came up. I just fell in love with the concept. I then quit my job and I reached out to a couple of local businesses and said, hey, do you need an app? I'm a science geek building apps for massive companies using Glide.
V88 is a UK-based software development agency. They build custom solutions that bring ideas to life and solve business process problems. And they do it all with no code. Now, what started as a small 2-person operation has grown into a much bigger team. Business is going good, and we have Oscar Brooks, CEO of V88, here to share all the juicy details. Hey, Oscar.
Indeed. Hey, man. How are you?
Great. Thank you for
Good.
taking the time to hop on today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
No, I know we've been going a little bit back and forth over the past couple of weeks preparing for this session. We got a lot of questions to get through, but I think the first and most important one is this. What is V88's elevator pitch? What are you guys all about?
That's a big question and a big way to start. We're the Glide guys. That's kind of what we say to people when we, when we initially have a conversation with somebody. We are all in on Glide as a product, as a service, and in our case, as a way of creating business software. To put it simply, what we've done is basically tried to combine business sense and commercial sense with a deep technical knowledge, as someone in my case who is not a traditional software developer, not an engineer, to try and understand the problems that businesses have and solve them effectively. In that's pretty much at the top level kind of how we pitch ourselves. We ask customers a lot of questions, and that's a trait that we laugh about with them. We have this running joke that on our gravestone it will say, here lies V88 ... They asked way too many questions, because our primary focus is to understand a customer, to understand a business before we talk shop and before we talk what an app may or may not do. So that's pretty much it. And Glide enables that holistic approach, and that's the one that we've taken thus far.
And with that in mind, thinking about the types of businesses, types of clients that Glide resonates with, but the work that you're doing, what it resonates with. Are you seeing any kind of common themes? Like, what sort of clients are you finding success with?
Yeah, that has evolved over time, is what I'm going to say to kick off with. So, and in many respects, a little bit the short answer is we build a lot of stuff, and if as far as we're concerned, if something can be built in Glide and we believe it to be a good fit, we will build it. But as time goes on, and speaking about the current state of affairs, we're building internal business solutions, I would say sort of 80 to 90% of the time, probably 90% of the time, actually. And in terms of the type of business, typically established ones. So law firms, property companies, sales businesses, solar companies, construction companies. And the typical solution is that of a sales system, a CRM, an inspection tool, a surveying tool, a project management system. And the theme is quite common throughout, that is this fairly sort of similar core structure with a bunch of nuance and uniqueness to that particular business process and how they do stuff. Hopefully that kind of summarizes it at the top level. A lot of stuff, but ideally, more often internal solutions with a client-facing element here and there.
Are you finding that when you're coming into these conversations, do these businesses have a process or a way of doing things already, and you're trying to modernize it or improve it, or is it like you're starting from scratch?
Often they do, but we're starting from scratch because we do sometimes, quite frequently, we are reinventing that process or at least improving it. So a business comes to us, of course, with a process. Now, whether that's the right process for them or not is often the question. And, there is an overlap in what we do as we learn about all of these different businesses and how they work and how similar ones that we have worked with operate with us. And Usually they come with a process, they come with an existing system of some form somewhere. Of course, they have to have their data somewhere. And our role in that really is to find a way to take the bad bits, the pain out of that existing process, and introduce a new way of doing things. So there's always some kind of framework, some kind of existing system and process. But what we build is not a replicate of that, it's an improvement. And that's really the key difference, I think. It's more than just copying what's there. It's taking the good bits, removing the bad bits, and adding more is the best way to put it, I would say.
Nice. So you're taking things that already exist,
Yeah.
improve it, iterate on it, while bringing them into a better way of doing things through software.
Yeah. And that thing that exists, it's quite often a spreadsheet. It's quite often a bunch of sticky notes, right? It's quite often someone's brain and someone's thoughts. And a lot of people, they run their businesses on a spreadsheet and in their mind. And we try and take that away from them. But kind of making sure, as a customer who I think is actually watching this tonight, said recently, in fact, today, making sure that the main thing remains the main thing, which is super, super important. So whether it's a spreadsheet, a sticky note, an existing off-the-shelf product, even a legacy custom piece of software, it's taking the good, removing the bad, and adding to it in immense ways.
I'm going to shift gears here a little bit.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do this work? Why did you decide to start an agency in the first place, to tackle this work?
I don't know, because it's so hard. No, I think it is tough. It is tough, but in a good way. It's important to have a challenge, I think. But I'll cut a long story super short, okay? But I'm a biochemist by trade, and I'm yet to wear a lab coat, and I'm yet to look down a microscope, and I'm quite delighted about that. But when I came out of university, I was working for a software company, and they had created a custom piece of software that was essentially like a platform for clinical trials, data capture and things like that. And I was in charge of kind of customer support, handover, and sort of sales and upsales. And the customers would always say, even just simple things like, could we change this form? Could we add this field? Could we view this data in a different way? Could we have a graph here that summarizes our data like this and not like this? And I would always kind of have to sort of reluctantly say, oh, I'm really sorry, guys, but I don't know if we can, or I'm going to have to speak to the engineers. And if I did find that we could actually provide that, it was months and months of work. We'd have to charge them a ridiculous amount of money. So this is becoming a long story, but I'm going to get to the chase.
Yeah, this is good. This is good.
So at that point, I was quite frustrated, because I felt like these customers just weren't delighted, and they should be. Software is supposed to be innovative. It's supposed to be transformative. And it was excellent in terms of if everyone wanted the same thing, but no one does actually want the exact same thing, right? And so I went home and I thought to myself, right, there must be a way of creating custom software quickly. And that was my first kind of Google search, was how can you create custom software fast? And then I sort of sat and had this moment of just, it dawned on me, but hang on a second, I actually can't create software. I can't code. So I'm stuffed. And then what happened is I then Googled what is the most important thing I've ever searched, which was, is there a way to create software without writing code? No Code came up, Glide came up. Cut a long story short, from there, I just fell in love with the concept, settled on Glide because it was, in my eyes, the most intuitive and had the most potential as an early adopter. And I then quit my job and I reached out to a couple of local businesses and said, hey, do you need an app, was the question at the time.
That's a leap.
And I can build it super quickly,
That's quite a leap, going from, I'm trying to solve this problem internally with where I'm working to now, you know what? I found this platform, this tool. I'm going to go all in, quit the job, start doing client work. Did you have any experience doing agency or freelance work prior to this?
No, I had none. Obviously, I had customer facing experience. I liked people. But I'd never worked in or for an agency. I had no concept of how it worked. In particular, a no code agency,
Kevin in the chat here has a really good question, kind of touches on what I have here in my notes. Those first conversations. Hey, do you need an app? Hey, do you need some software? How did those
Yeah.
first conversations go with those first clients?
With sweaty armpits primarily. I used to find it, super nerve-wracking. And my initial vision was this concept of speed. So I was trying to say to people, look, speed and therefore cost, or lack of. So I phoned a couple of local businesses, and at this point in time, it was lockdown or coming out of. And it was this idea of creating apps that would allow the business to communicate and receive updates from a community of people that they were responsible for or helping. So physios, charities, and things like that. And the first one we ever sold was, and it took the skin off my back in terms of what we quoted and how long it took and everything like that. But it was a red, amber, green update system for those affected by mental health issues and substance abuse. And they were submitting daily updates, and a key worker would see these updates come in on their side on a basic Glide Classic app. And if it was red, it would highlight to them that it needed immediate attention, and they would phone up the individual and check in with them and guide them through that process. So it was great for many reasons, because it got me into a project, and it happened to be really successful. And it was, touched my heartstrings a little bit, because it made a huge difference to, I would imagine, some people's lives in that situation at the time. So it started off, it filled me with inspiration, that individual moment. But yeah, I phoned people, knocked on doors, just went sort of fairly old school with the initial approach, and just leveraged sort of family connections and stuff like that.
Was there a certain line of business or verticals, category of business that you were focusing on more than others?
There was initially, and we've always tried to stay in line with what Glide's ideal sort of customer is in terms of its capabilities. And at the time, back in the day, this is V88 was actually 4 years old this month, I think, incredibly. And thanks. And it was mobile apps to enhance communication delivered at speed with immense value. Now it's internal business solutions to streamline processes delivered with speed at immense value. So the latter hasn't changed, but the type of solution, and therefore the type of business, has changed as Glide has become more scalable and has evolved into a mature platform that it is today.
I want to stay on that thread a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you make the call when you're talking to, let's say, a potential client reaches out and says, hey, we're trying to solve this problem? Knowing whether or not Glide or any platform is right for that client, how do you make that call?
Yeah. I mean, this is a huge question. I get asked this question so often, and it's such an important one. Honesty is, as in all walks of life, but in this business, honesty is of utmost importance. And we have an ethos that we created at V88, which is every customer must be delighted. And what that includes is choosing a project with the confidence that you believe they will be delighted. And in terms of actually finding out how you believe that to be the case, or that to be likely, it's really two core things to cover at the top level. The first thing is, what is it that they actually want a potential piece of software to do for them, right? In terms of kind of functionalities and things like that, and use cases, and can Glide and can no code achieve those things? In terms of, will they get the desired experience that they're looking for in an app? And the second one is scale. So how many users do they need? How much data do they need to be able to store? How much historical data is this system going to begin with, which is really sometimes can catch you by surprise, where you forget that there's a migration element in many cases. But it really comes down to, can Glide provide the features and experience that the customer needs based on their problems, or based on their spec. Some do have specifications. And is it scalable enough both now and based on in 4 years' time, when they open this app, is it still going to work? And if we can tick those two boxes, then as far as we're concerned, based on our ability, we can pretty much say to the customer, you're going to be delighted by this. So it ties in with our ethos, but really it comes down to the capabilities of the tool from a functionality perspective and scale. Those are the two main things, and it's essential to understand those at the beginning. So we'll spend time whiteboarding, prototyping, structuring data to ensure that it can perform at the level it needs to.
It sounds like, and I think this is a really important call out for anyone who's thinking about starting an agency. It's really tempting early on to say, yeah, we could probably pull this off.
I've been there.
You see the potential billable hours. It's like, yeah, this is a good project. We could probably do this. Yeah. But there's a difference between, can we do this? Can we pull it off? And can we do this really well? Yeah. Is this going to be to your point, is this going to be a delightful experience for them once we ship it?
100%.
Knowing when to make that call.
Yeah, and there are no, just because you're using no code, it's super fast, it's super powerful, it's intuitive, but that doesn't mean you get quick wins. It's a long game, and the more time you think about the possibility of a project success, the more chance you have of deploying successful solutions, and therefore the more likely you are to be recommended, the more likely you are to get a good review, the more likely you are to have an excellent case study where the things you're actually saying about the outcome are true. So it has a compounding effect, and it is absolutely worth the effort. I always say to customers, this is the hardest bit. The hardest part of the job is us making sure that this is feasible and that we're going to delight you. The rest we can handle, because if we know that, we know our capabilities, we know Glide's capabilities. The rest is excellent. The rest is fine.
So when you do have a client come through,
yeah,
and the project it's a good fit for Glide, what does that sales process look like? Can you walk me through, how long does it take? What are the steps involved? How are you guys selling?
Yeah. So at the top level, and my dad, who will be watching and will laugh and will smile at this very moment, he's also a co-founder at V88, and he has been utterly imperative to our success thus far. He said to me at the very beginning, when I was going on these sales conversations, he said, you have 2 ears and you have 1 mouth. And the most important thing to answer those questions properly is to listen in detail to the customer's business. So rule number 1 for us is to understand them. So we want to know who they are, what they do in detail, even if it has nothing to do with the app that needs to be created, which might be 5% of their business. We need to understand all of it. And then we need to understand why they're here. Not even necessarily what do you want this app to do, but why are you here? What has brought you to talk to a Glide expert? So that's the start of the process. The first conversation is I want to sit back. I want to listen to where you're at and what your history is and what your future ideally looks like. At that point, you will then hopefully be welcome to kind of ask the questions around 2 core things. Those are use cases and scalability. So how many different people, types of people, roles, whatever they may be, need to use a solution like this? And again, how does it need to scale based on historical data, based on future data? And that will allow us, the use cases will allow us to architect a data structure out of that, which is ultimately what we're going to build as a foundation for any Glide app. So the process will be a conversation to listen, then a subsequent conversation typically, and that will be around diving a little bit deeper into the solution that we're actually here to discuss. And if we believe after reviewing those conversations, perhaps a couple more, perhaps some chargeable scoping in some cases. If it's a big one, it's important to do that sometimes. If we believe they're going to be delighted, then at that point, I will put forward an indicative price. And if that works for the customer, if that's reasonable, then what I'll look to do is actually write an in-depth sort of specification type thing that will have a more formalized quotation on it. I hope that all makes sense.
It makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And
to just relax.
Yes. Yeah. It's very easy to get wound up when you're going through these negotiations and conversations with a potential client. To that end, now that you've been going through this process for a while now, are you leaning on any templates, like things to help you keep that speed and efficiency going?
It's a really good question. So we do have templated elements of our process, but it's a really difficult one. My concern was always trying to create such a rigid system that you lose the ability to be agile, for want of a better word. Maybe that is actually the right word, but agile. So what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is, yes, we have templates, but they are totally just top level frameworks. They're not kind of cut and copy full in-depth proposals, because that is impossible. The beauty of Glide is that it enables custom software. So by templating and adding rigidity to your process, kind of counteracts one of the main reasons that a customer might benefit from a Glide type route. So we have frameworks and sort of sectioned out pieces of proposals, let's say, but they are by no means kind of cut and copy, because every customer is different. Some customers want to see visual representations of how their data might be structured. Some want to understand the use cases by bullet points. So we have a framework, but we tailor every single one that goes out the door.
Jim has a good question here in the chat. So when you get to the tail end of this process and you're figuring out, based on all of the discovery that you've done, and that's a really important call out too for anyone who's starting an agency, that discovery phase, really understanding what is the expectation here, what are we building, spend time on that. It's time well spent. But once you get to the point of quoting, how are you calculating that time? Estimating seems like a really, really hard thing. What's your approach to that?
It's a really good question. So there are two types of Glide customer as we see it. There is what we call a solution customer. Okay. And a solution customer is somebody who comes with a very clear vision of what they want. They have probably put together some form of specification already. They've outlined, we receive some incredible sort of PowerPoints, specifications, workflows, and things like that. The solution customer, essentially after 10, 20, 30, 40 projects, you just kind of know how long it's going to take your team. So with that one, you can pretty confidently quote based on a scope of work. The other type of customer is the one that seems very scary at the beginning, but we've worked with so many of these and they're just incredible to work with, is what we deem the relationship customer. And that is a customer that has a whole load of problems. They have a whole load of frustrations and they want some kind of solution, but they are not quite sure what that is. And so what we will do in that case is take an ongoing approach where it's not so much based on we're going to give you X for Y. It's more we're gonna work on a solution with you for roughly this, but to be completely honest, we're not quite sure because neither are you. And so it's a case of actually just being honest and saying, we think it looks like this, it may be this, but it may be this, and having that discussion and coming up with something that kind of makes sense. And usually the best way to approach this is to break it down into an initial proof of concept. Solve the first and most irritating pain point first. That is usually a smaller piece of, potentially a smaller piece of work. And that will give you a better picture and understanding of, have you met their expectations? Can they see value? And then what's next? So breaking it down into chunks and to phases is essential, whether they're separate pieces of work or one piece of work, but you're still doing them in these chunks. And the more you deliver and the more honest you are, the more trust is gained there, and hence why we call it a relationship customer. I hope that answers the question.
Based on the chat that I'm seeing, yes.
Okay, nice.
Lots
Cool.
of good vibes from that response. Bob has a good follow-up here. When you're dealing with it, sounds like one path is very much like, we have a spec, we need you to build this. The other side is, we have this problem, we need help solving it. And
Yes.
It's a bit more consultative. You said that it's just kind of a feeling based on the experience that you've had so far. Is there anything that's a bit more quantitative, like a little bit more objective, analytics, tracking, anything you're doing to get a sense of that beyond just a feeling?
Yes. So you know that a particular integration, for example, if you had everything you needed and it worked first time, it might be quick. But you have to assume that if you're integrating with another platform, there's got to be contingency there for gaining access to a bunch of different systems, setting up integrations, testing them in a test environment, tweaking them to suit, and then kind of releasing them. So a particular integration we would always treat as an additional piece of work that we would charge for, and that's always going to be, in 9 times out of 10, a couple of days of work to get it right if you want to deliver it absolutely right. So the worst thing you can do there is quote something where you feel like it's a squeeze, because time is essential. Having that time to test things, to think about things, to potentially need to re-engineer something if actually you figure out maybe there's a more optimal way, and you don't need to tell the customer that. But we'll often find ourselves internally thinking, oh, I'm so glad we gave ourselves those extra few days because we could rework this, and we miss this one edge case that's popped up that's kind of smacked us in the face, and we've gone, oh, hang on a second. I think when you're looking at integrations in particular, those are the things to be cautious about. The same applies for on a glide level. If you're looking at big tables or SQL, they don't compute in the same way that glide tables does, because at the top level, glide tables is doing its computation device side and big tables is doing its computation server side. And so it does have limitations. And it's important to understand that there is a difference, and you will want time to architect something if you have a combination of glide tables and big tables or SQL, to test your relations, your lookups, your rollups, whatever computation is happening there. Just assume, again, it's going to take longer than you may think by just playing with glide tables. So I know that's not particularly quantified, but I wanted to take that and try and pick out the bits that are worth investing time into and thinking through to make sure you're quoting for that.
It's almost like you're identifying within, let's say you're kind of scoping things out and you're identifying these pieces. It's kind of high level, but you're identifying these pieces and you say, oh, well, we know that there are some unknowns here, or there are things here that we need to put some buffer or some padding around. So if
Absolutely.
you think something's, well, this might take us 3 hours. Well, to be safe, let's scope this out at 5 hours, 6 hours because of this aspect of it. And just kind of always doing that.
Yeah. And to be upfront, and again, to be transparent with the customer about it. Often customers will, they think glide, no code, speed. So yes, but relative to custom software development, right? If you're adding a couple of days, well, you're still, 6 months quicker on a 4-week project, right? It's ridiculous, especially glide, which is obviously just elite in that sense. So it's about saying, we really want this to be right, because you actually do. And anyone who's starting something and building glide software will have a passion for it, because this is what I've realized. This community, everyone who's building in glide, they're doing so because they love doing it, not because they've seen it as a business opportunity. So we're all problem solvers, and so we care. And there's no harm in telling the customer you care, and therefore that's why you want to charge more for something, because you care about their outcome, and that's the whole point. That's the reason behind it.
Setting expectations seems to be a recurring theme here in how you guys approach your work. One of the challenges of working with clients is you run into hiccups.
Yeah.
What's your approach to dealing with that? How do you deal with those difficult conversations?
So I'll go through the most common expectations the most common objections that we get. And I'm sure this is about to be super relatable. The first one, and this is something that is becoming less and less and less of an objection. And that is, can Glide really do this? Classic question. Their friend is a software engineer and has said, no, it's no code. It's just kind of fun and games. It's nothing serious. It doesn't have the power. So the first thing I would say there is, you can tell somebody until you're blue in the face that Glide can achieve what they want. Ultimately, after a few projects, you have case studies that you can show. You have referrals and people who you've built powerful software systems for inside of enterprise level businesses, who will sit there and say it's the best thing that we have ever implemented in our company. And we've had this said by companies that are turning over hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think it comes back to the and again, another way of dealing with this one is to go back, in our case, to our ethos. It's, look, we don't want to build this for you if we don't think it's going to work, because it's going to make us look rubbish and it's going to make Glide look rubbish, and we don't want that. So that's kind of the first classic objection. The next one is pricing, of course. Pricing is an interesting one because it's subject to the relative expectation of the person you're speaking to. So if you have someone who's previously been quoted by a traditional software business, your quote is going to be a shining light. But if you've had someone who's been quoted by a much more affordable method or by an off-the-shelf product, then of course your quote's going to be more expensive. So the first thing to understand there is relative expectation. And I guess there's two main ways of handling this. The first one is understanding and explaining the value of the solution to the customer. So, Glide apps that we create, they're not a direct return on investment in terms of, you don't spend X and earn X. You're not delivering marketing services or something like that. There are Glide solutions that generate leads, and we've had customers who generate business by showcasing their internal solutions and their systems. And the customer goes, wow, actually, can we have a client portal? Yes, you can just drop one on top, which is obviously really cool. Anyway, but the other one is that actually that customer just doesn't have the budget for it. And so in that case, it's a case of recommending an alternative where there may be something more affordable for them based on where they are. The other two, that I'll really quickly brush over is what happens if V88 fails or disappears. So what's beautiful about Glide in this instance is the customer owns the Glide account, or they should. The customer owns their team. They invite us in, and they can kick us out at any time. And there's this growing sea of experts who are brilliant. So I openly say to to customers, there is, I think that the Glide experts, and we work together, we communicate, we refer to each other based on knowing each other's skill sets. But the point is the customer is not going to be at the mercy of a traditional software developer who's sort of sat there on all their code and no one else can understand it. So the important thing there is that if we fail, well, actually, get Bob Petito in there or another excellent expert, and they can take over your app. And the other one is if Glide disappears, and sorry, Bob, I've just burdened you with additional as if he's not busy enough. But, if Glide disappears, what happens then? So, the customer can export their data whenever they want to, is the first thing. But more importantly is that Glide have excellent backers. They are in an industry that has an upwards trajectory, and they are somewhat leading that sector that is no code and this kind of no code business apps. But actually, just looking at David Siegel and having spoken to him, who I utterly love and respect.
Context for everybody else who doesn't. David's our CEO.
The founder.
Founder.
See, his vision is, and he said this to my face in person, is to build, I don't know what the number is now, but a lot of software developers through a platform like Glide. And we believe it when he says that. I certainly do anyway. So those are the 4 core objections, and that's how we handle them. And I hope that kind of resonates with some of the other people in here who may have had similar questions.
I'm seeing a lot of love for it in the chat. I think it's one of the things that I love about our community, especially our experts, is that sense of camaraderie and mutual success. As Glide succeeds, we all succeed, and it's a good thing.
Do we ever? It's so true. It's so true. And shout out to obviously yourself, but Brett as well, for just turning that community into something very special. It was at the beginning, but it's even better now.
I appreciate that. Moving on to operations. I've seen a lot of questions about this in the chat. So I'm going to start off with this. The V88 way feels like you have a very clear way of doing things. Can you talk us through what a typical build is like? And I know every build is different, but in general.
No, there's a method to the madness. So the first thing that we have is we have a set of best practices. And before I talk about the process of a build, I just want to highlight the best practices that we deploy. And that is naming convention through columns, through screen names, through action names, through table names, and even through components. We have a naming convention such that when we look at an app to make tweaks or enhancements, which happens a lot, that we haven't touched for 4 months, we understand it and can pick it up. So the first thing to really nail is naming convention. Have a structure to how you name columns throughout every app. Create a naming convention that you understand and that your team understands, and make sure that they build in the same way. And our team are exceptionally good at this. So I can look at one of Martin's solutions, one of James's solutions, one of any of the guys' apps and understand it and see it. You should be able to look at your list of Glide actions, and by looking at the actions, know roughly what the app does. That's what we say. That's what Dad said recently, actually, and it was really cool because we tested it out and it works. So naming is really important, and the same applies to the style that you apply. But in terms of the process, roughly as follows: we will always focus on data structure first, because data structure is everything. Data is king when it comes to Glide and when it comes to a lot of other things as well, right? But we're talking about Glide here. Data structure first. So design your tables, create your relations, even if there's nothing in the front end, in my opinion, and get that structure working and clean. Then focus on introducing your core elements. So your CRUD elements, creating the core records, reading them, updating them, deleting them, right? CRUD. And then we will look at introducing the workflows, the actions and the integrations and the more complex stuff, the sort of higher level stuff. During the process of doing this, we will have regular check-ins with the customer that will typically be prearranged. So we want to make it a hands-on experience. We want the customer to feel like we're building with them, not for them. We don't want to disappear and show up a month later with an app that may or may not be how they want. So it's important to check in, and just being cautious of kind of scope creep there, but checking in with clear set boundaries. But it makes it so much better. And it makes it fun because you get to know them and you have a laugh. And, we've got customers that we're talking about the Euros with at the moment, and it's great. So it's a catch up as well as a check-in. And then we will carry out internal QA. So we'll run the apps internally. We'll set up a couple of dummy users, try and break them. Anything that we've picked up, we will resolve. And then we will hand over, allowing time for feedback and tweaks at the end of the project. That's a typical top level flow of a build.
After the launch, after deployment, are you providing post-launch support? What does ongoing maintenance? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. We can support anybody who we work with on an ad hoc basis. if there are issues, if something's not how it's supposed to be, if it's a solution client, which I mentioned earlier, then if something doesn't meet the spec, that's on us. Additional things we will work on an ad hoc basis, or we can agree a support package, as we call it priority support. And that essentially sort of guarantees X amount of time per month dedicated to that customer for tweaks. For maintenance, we'll do a monthly data check to make sure that their system is clean, their data is clean, everything is as expected. So yeah, absolutely, support's essential. To offload a Glide solution and just walk away, unless the customer has specifically said that, is it's never ideal. So it's important to allow time for that. 100%. Yeah, and it's a tricky thing to manage, but it's so worth it.
I think too, when you get into the realm of, it sounds like an ongoing retainer, just having that stable revenue, stable cash flow as an agency versus the going from one project to the next, that must feel pretty nice as just this stable line.
Yeah, of course it does. It does. It goes back to it is honestly, it has to be, in our opinion, whatever we think will genuinely give value to the customer and benefit them. So I don't try to sell support packages. We don't have support retainers with a lot of our customers. I mention it as a recommendation that is something that is optional. We don't make them sort of sign up to an obliged sort of term or contract. Our approach is we recommend you're going to need some support. You will want to tweak this. You will come up with so many ideas once you see your Glide solution. You won't even believe it. And that is so true. I bet some of the other guys are laughing. I can see the faces popping. So it's something that we recommend. And yes, it is great. Of course it's great. Of course it's great for business.
Now, outside of Glide, when you are doing things like documentation or managing tasks on a build, are there other tools top of mind that you really lean on? I'm curious. I'm curious about what's in your kit.
Yeah. So you'll laugh. You'll laugh. We became our ideal customer. And it took us way too long for this to happen. But we have, so you're talking about sort of project management and
management. Yeah. Just
running
what's in your
the business.
Yeah.
We have used, and I'm going to just try and list them as quickly as possible. Asana, Monday, ClickUp, TickTick. We've used Pipedrive. We've used Plutio. I've had a brain melt, but we have genuinely used every project management tool that exists in the modern world. And some of them are brilliant if you have a very fixed offering and a fixed product, or if you have someone who could consistently maintain it, perhaps. But none of them seemed to do what we wanted them to do very specifically. There are certain things we wanted to track. There are certain ways we wanted to structure data. The way we manage deals in our sales pipeline is very niche. So we built our own tech stack using Glide, and we run V88 on Glide now. And we are going to introduce a customer portal, which we've been working on in the background, which we're excited about. I know some of the other guys have got something like this going. For documentation, we use various tools. We used to use Google Docs, which is just, it's super fluid and easy. We use a tool called Craft, which is really, really cool for documentation. It's a beautiful app. It's a beautiful product. But most of our ops are run on a Glide system now. So that's sales CRM, that's project management, that's administrative stuff, marketing, all tasks, billing activity, invoicing, everything is now running on Glide.
Wow. You built the whole suite.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Maybe we'll productize it one day. Who knows? We've taken the best from every tool, that we liked, but it's personal. That's the beauty of Glide. So
a whole stack of V88 Glide templates that you can take and just go and build your own. There you go. So you've grown the team quite a bit over the past year, even. What are you looking for in potential team members? What has that growth process been like for you?
People who are pleasant in terms of what we're looking for, people who are honest, people who have good communication skills. As a Glide developer, we believe you've got to be able to communicate and have that consultative element. Consultative, yes. And the ability to not just build an app that you're given, but to ask questions, to not be afraid to challenge a potential better way to do something. And people that with that in mind, that think outside the box, that enjoy solving problems, and ideally those that are quite good at Glide. Although that's the one thing that we can fix ourselves, really. But in terms of traits, yeah, just great, honest people who are good at communicating. And yeah, in terms of growth, we have not rushed at all. In fact, we've done the complete opposite. So we spent 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years, as just two of us, just myself and Dad. And we really just wanted to refine who we were, what type of business we wanted to be. And we've gone from 2 to 8 people in just under a year. And that's not all devs. We now have a project manager who's started with us as well. So it's been good. It's been quick. Hence the need for a system that works how we work. Hence Glide, the Glide CRM.
Love that. You mentioned, imparting that knowledge, the Glide knowledge on your team members, being able to teach that. How are you doing that? How are you helping these team members stay sharp and level up their skills?
Yeah, Glide University Level 3 is a great thing for them to do on the side. Anyone who comes and joins us, we say you need Glide Level 3 certification as a kind of precursor. We deploy best practices up front. They're on our whiteboard, which I can't. So we have a big whiteboard here, and we have the five V88 house practices with our ethos at the top, which is a bit of fun, but it is super important to just get that top level vision in there. And we have a lot of cross-fertilization internally, by which I mean, if I know that someone is struggling or has said, hey, I'm working on this project at the moment, as you know, and I'm struggling with the, let's say, API integration, then I'll hook them up with a member of the team who does know that. And I'll say, look, can you guys collaborate? Can you spend the time to show so-and-so how to build this feature in? So we all help each other out. We're all super active on Slack, which is a great tool for that. And huddles just make things so much easier. So we help each other and teach each other. I learn an unlimited amount from our guys who have much more of a touch point directly with the latest, Glide features. And I'm learning all the time from them. And, I hope that they learn some stuff from me as well.
That's fantastic. I love the, tap into your team, tap into the knowledge.
Yeah,
that surrounds
100%, you. 100%.
Now, a couple last questions here, and then we'll switch over to audience Q&A. If you could go back in time, what would you do differently in building a V88, if anything?
Nothing. Nothing. Do you know what? Me personally, Glide completely changed my life. I knew I could do something cool. I had this feeling I'd do something cool somehow, somewhere. But I wouldn't do a degree in biochemistry for a start, because I'm supposed to be looking down a microscope right now, and that is not my thing. It's not for me. And so kudos to Glide for just being a brilliant product. I think if I would done anything differently, it would have been to understand sooner what Glide's ideal sort of solution would look like. But we were very, very early on, and I think all of us who were there at the beginning, we've all been trying to work that out, and there was no blueprint to follow. So honestly, nothing. I think there's no rush with this kind of thing, and you've got to just focus on the one thing, and for us that thing is developing Glide software. I mean, it takes time, so probably not a lot.
And then final question, advice for all the folks in chat, folks watching this later. What advice do you have for anyone else thinking about starting their own agency?
It is hard. There is a lot of high level thinking. You're constantly thinking about data structure. You're constantly understanding complex processes, multiple, in a given time frame. be prepared to put in the hours. It is not a 9 to 5. If you want to build an agency, it is a significant undertaking. I just want to make that super clear. Start small, pick manageable projects that match your current abilities. Some people come in as engineers and pick up Glide and are just building crazy stuff off the bat. Some people come from a more sort of slightly different sort of inexperienced but logical thinking background, like I did. So we started super small with basic projects, and get processes and practices in place, as I say, that you can apply to every solution that you do. So, from meeting a customer to finishing a project, you got to do this, 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 you got to do this. Now, that fluctuates, but there are core things. And surround yourself with like-minded people. Get involved with other experts. Chat to other experts. There are so many who are joining the community at the moment, and there's so much talent around, and everyone is seemingly super willing to help and share and collaborate and brainstorm and learn off each other. So surround yourself and learn from these people. Those are the things I would probably suggest.
It's fantastic. All right, so we're almost at time, and we have a pile of questions in the chat. We got questions that came in through registration. So I think what we're going to have to do, we're going to take a couple of these questions, but you and I need to have a follow-up, dig through some of these questions, and then make that available to everybody who registered.
100%. Let's do it. Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect. Awesome. So we'll do that, and that'll be available on demand. Everybody can grab that. So I know we're running late for some folks, depending on where you're watching. But a couple of questions that came in through registration. I want to get to these. Success metrics. What does success look like to you? What KPIs are you looking at?
Smiles on faces. 2 metrics, width and duration. I know it sounds ridiculous. We of course, we look for project value. And all of those things, but honestly, to begin with, especially, delight people. Look for and make customers as happy as you possibly can within the time frame you have for a project, and make sure that you put your worth down on paper when you're quoting people. Just because it's Glide, just because it's no code, that doesn't mean it's incredibly cheap or free. It's you're providing immense direct or indirect value, and so we always will look for that metric to make sure we're charging what we think we are worth for a project.
That's a fantastic call out for everyone thinking about running an agency or already running an agency. The smiles on faces, charging what you're worth, value your time, value your client's time. So final question here from registration. Thoughts on AI? We haven't really talked about AI at all, but what are you seeing in terms of demand from clients? What's your hot take?
Demand is huge. We think it's going to be big, but I think we recognize it's still very much embryonic in its journey, in its timeline. What I can say is we'll be introducing an AI department to V88 to understand, how we can, in detail, provide value to customers and not just use it as a gimmick. If you look at what Apple have done, we're hearing glimpses of what they might be doing now, but they've sat, they've waited, they've observed. It's obviously transformational. It obviously has immense power, but we want to be able to apply it in a business sense. And I think Glide AI is the perfect introduction because it's subtle. You're not kind of flooding AI into an app to do everything. You're subtly using it to streamline things, to analyze things. And I think it's only going to get better. So I think less is more right now in terms of AI use. Customers want it, but do they want it because they need it, or do they want it because they think they want it, is the really important question that we are asking at the moment. So of course we think it's awesome. Of course we're going to use it. Yeah. A couple of laughs, couple of hearts, couple of claps.
People are on the same wavelength as you, I think, in the chat. All right. Yeah. All right. So Oscar, thank you for joining us today. How can folks reach you? What's the best way to get in touch?
So right now it'd be LinkedIn or our website, or if you're an aspiring expert and you're in the expert community, shoot me a DM. I'll stick a couple of links in the chat for my LinkedIn and our website.
Perfect. And speaking of the experts community, so if you are interested in joining the expert program, there's a bunch of benefits to joining, and it's free to join. Perks, revenue share, early beta access, exclusive resources from the Glide team.
Second that, it's incredible. Get involved, guys. Anything is possible. I'm a science geek building apps for massive companies using Glide. So it's amazing. It's amazing.